Okay, now I'm going to illustrate the stepwise model building, or subset variable selection using the three methods: forward selection, backward elimination, and stepwise. And we're going to use the Toyota Corolla data from before. So we start with data partition. Okay, so let's do a 60-40 partition. Okay, and it's possible that before you do the partition, one could look at running a principal component analysis to select a PCA as input, or you could do some additional analysis to pare down the predictor. So I'm skipping those, and you can even do some transformations. But I'm skipping that step because I want to look at just the regression part. And then we do the regression. Okay. Now let's review let's run this, and let's go back to the data source and edit variables and see where we are. Okay. So make sure that we understand the variables. So we've already set, last time when we opened this data set, we've already set the levels, and we've rejected a couple of variables, and price is our target. Okay, so that so far so good. Now regression. Okay, so here are the regression parameter values. So let's look at some of these. I'm not going to go through all of them, and I have in the Word document, I have included some information about some of the parameters that you can set. It's in the back of the document. So here we can select what kind of effects should be considered, should the regression model consider. So main effects means that you just look at each variable. Each variable is a main effect, each predictor variable, and you include the predictor variable. Consider each predictor variable as a possible predictor for the model. So that's what main effect means. Now you can say, you can look at two-factor interactions, and if you say yes, then what Enterprise Miner will do is you'll multiply each predictor with all the other predictors. So it's two-factor interaction. So x sub 1 times x sub 2, x sub 1 times x sub 3, x sub 1 times x sub 4, and so on till x sub p. And then do the same with x sub 2, x sub 2 times x sub 3, x sub 2 times x sub 4, and so on. So the product of two predictors taken at a time, all those would be interactions, will be automatically generated. This is the reason why even when you start out with fairly small number of variables, you may ultimately end up with a huge number of predictors. You start with 10, so if you have 10 predictors, and the interaction would be, so how many interactions terms you will end up with 10 predictors. So 10 combination 2 will give you 45 interaction terms. So you start with 10 plus 45 interaction terms, that's 55. And then you may also consider some polynomials if you want polynomial terms. Okay, so you will take the variable and then raise it to the power 2, 3, 4. So these are some additional terms that you can include. So we're not going to do any of those. We're going to simply use the main effects. So main effects means you take the predictors, use those predictors as is. Okay. Next is, of course, this is very important parameter that you have to set. So the regression type, you need to make sure that it is the correct type is selected. Okay. Default is logistics. So you have to change it to linear regression. Logistic regression is only when the target is nominal. Okay. So you don't want to suppress intercept. That's pretty much it. And now, if you set the selection model to none, then all the predictors that have a role of input, okay, will be included as just one. You'll get one regression. That's it. There is no subset selection. Now, if you change that, okay, you can set it to one of the three. You can set it to forward, backward, or stepwise. So let's look at forward first, okay? And you can then do a selection criterion here. Okay, so the default for linear regression is mean square, sum of squares of error. Sum of squares of error is what we minimize. Or you can, in the case of logistics regression, you can select validation error here, or misclassification, or if you have set up decision values, remember the profit loss matrix, if you had set that up, then you can select profit slash loss. Okay? Then it will run through the regression with that as the criterion for model selection. Okay? So we're going to leave it at default. Okay? And use selection default. Now, selection default is, if you select selection default to no, then this ellipsis will become active. Then you can go in and select a different criterion for bringing in variables or throwing variables out in the selection methodology, forward, backward, or stepwise. Remember, I say in forward, you're going to bring in variables until all the remaining variables are insignificant. So what is the insignificance level? So usually you use 5% level of significance. So entry significance is 5%. So new variables will be entered only to the extent that the significance level, the p-value, is less than 5%. So once you get to a stage where all the remaining variables p-values are greater than 5%, then you will stop. If you want to set an even lower level of significance, like 1%, you can change that to 0.01. Or higher, you want 10%, then you can put 0.1 here. Okay. Now, stay significance is the opposite. The variables that are already in, okay, what is the significance you should have for it to continue to stay in? Okay, so that's 5%. In the analysis, if it becomes more than 5%, then that variable will get thrown out. And if you want to change that, you will change it here. So this is where you will make the change. And what we're going to do is we're going to simply say yes. Okay, if the selection default is yes, this option is dimmed. Only when it is no, this will become active. All right. So these are the things that you need to look at. One is whether to include main effects and what other effects you want to include. Okay, and whether it is linear regression or logistics. And then what is the selection criterion, okay? And then selection defaults, alpha value 5% or so. So once that is set up, then we can go and run the regression. So now this is going to do a forward selection model. When you look at the results, so here the output. So we start with the number of nominal, number of interval inputs, and then target. So the nominal input, they will be converted into dummy variables before it gets included. All right. So here is step 0. Okay, there is no predictor variable included in the model. And then step 1, so one predictor variable. Okay, it tells you which one, okay, manufacturer year entered in step 1. Okay, and then step 2, the main effect that gets included, and so on, and keeps going. Okay, let's skip to the chase here, and the last step, the selected model. Okay, no additional effects met the 5% level of significance. So it gives you a summary of which effect is included at each step. So step 1, step 2, and all the way to step 16, where the predictor metallic rim yes or no is included. Here you see that color, there are 9 variables in color. So that's 9 dummy variables that was included. Fuel type, 2 dummy variables. And those are the 3 dummy variables that are included as a group in that step. Okay. And here is the analysis of variance for the selected model, and then we have the t-test for each individual predictor. Okay. And we have the lift statistic here at the end. So this is your lift statistic that you will see presented here. Okay, so if you select assessment, score ranking matrix, assessment, score distribution. So here is where you get no, that's not it. This is your lift. So mean predicted and then mean target.